Welcome to Woah Drama Stories. We indulge of speaking of day-to-day troubles of human beings. Let's not wait any longer and start with the video. This has been the most terrifying night of my life. I suppose I'm sharing this to figure out what to do next, but I'm terrified of doing anything. However, any advice would be much appreciated. First, some context. Faith and I met in our sophomore year of high school, roughly 2 years ago. I fell in love with her right away and had a big crush on her. Unfortunately, she already had a boyfriend. I tried to move on from her and dated a girl for a short time before that came apart, but finally, I found myself being Faith's shoulder to cry on when her boyfriend went missing. It was quite disconcerting. They went on a date, he dropped her off, and then he vanished from the face of the planet. I'm not the sort to take advantage of someone else's pain, so I kept my distance as she worked through her feelings. However, after a few months, she invited me out, and things progressed and we began dating. Things have been going well lately. She has visited my house and seen my parents, but I have yet to meet her father. Her mother died while she was young, leaving only the two of them. Faith doesn't want us to meet until she feels he's ready, so I guess he's a little overprotective at times. He was out of town this weekend, so Faith asked me over to keep her company. At first, we were rather chill, just relaxing and watching crappy horror flicks. But after a time, we got into a very serious discussion. She told me she had terrible nightmares about her mother at times. She had dreams about traveling down a corridor and hearing her mother weeping in another room. Part of her would want to run towards her, but another part would want to flee. She'd hear a dreadful breaking sound and a guttural cry before she could do anything. She described it as louder as a baseball being struck. She'd wake up in a cold sweat after that. She also expressed concern about me leaving when we were out. She claimed that the disappearance of her ex-boyfriend terrified her. He just got in his car and never returned. She began to quiver slightly, and I could see she wanted comfort. We snuggled for a while, and then I offered to get her a blanket. She told me that some were stored in a cupboard down the hall upstairs. I stepped up to the closet and glanced inside. When I discovered it, one of the bedroom doors was slightly open alongside it. Because of the decor, I assumed it was her father's room, and I decided to peek in quickly. Maybe I'd look into his hobbies and wow him when we finally met. The room turned out to be rather empty, except for the boomer rock posters I noticed when I first walked in. My interest was piqued when I heard a door open. When I looked over, I noticed that her father's closet had opened on its own. I didn't want him to think anyone was in there, so I started to lock the door and stumbled to a halt. For a brief time, I was stunned by the contents of the closet. The rear wall was covered in a strange collage of sorts. Faith's mother was memorialized in the first third. Photographs of her, together with newspaper cuttings about her death. I had no idea she had been murdered. There was a photo of her ex-boyfriend, scribbled notes regarding his address, and newspaper cuttings about his disappearance below that. One of the papers included a section describing the one piece of evidence the cops uncovered. His lucky baseball bat, scrubbed clean but left in the woods, circled. Aside from a photo of myself and a comment about where I stayed, the bottom third was empty. I looked at that thing for so long that I heard Faith begin to climb the stairs. She was wondering how long it would take me to find a blanket. I hurriedly locked the closet door and crept out of her father's room. I lied that there was an issue at home and that I needed to go. Faith was concerned, but I assured her that everything would be okay, despite the fact that my heart told me differently. My hands were shaking the entire way home. I wanted to contact my parents for advice, but they were out on a date night, so the place was vacant. As I approached the driveway, I heard a tremendous smashing sound. A humanoid silhouette rushed out from my house, just out of the corner of my headlights. Fear gripped my entire body. I took a big breath and headed to the front door from my car. I felt like puking as I got to the front door. The doorknob was extensively scraped, as if someone was attempting to pick it, but that wasn't the most terrifying thing. An ancient baseball bat had been thrown on the ground in a rush. What should I do? Story 2. My father was always nice and caring throughout his life. He's taken care of me, raised me, and quite candidly, spoiled me since I was a child. I'll never forget how he calmed me when I was terrified, or embraced me when I said, "You're the best daddy in the universe." I told him again and over. I used to say it when I was a teenager, which was embarrassing. My brother went missing when I was little, and it seemed that Dad put all of his love into me to make up for it. My father suffered a stroke last week. My mother called me to the hospital, and she was as short and abrupt as always. I stepped over to hold my dad's hand as he stared at me, locked in the terrifying face he'd had when the stroke struck. I sobbed for what felt like a whole day over him. The next day, I resolved to get myself together. I promised Dad I was going to bring him some new clothes and personal items to help him recover. I think I noticed his heart rate increase on the monitor as I went out, but it may be because of what I now know. I arrived at the home and went up to Dad's room. I took several shirts and sweatpants and went to his drawer to get some personal items. I was surprised to see a tightly bound bundle of papers that appeared to be handwritten. How to Be a Good Father, A Guide to Love and Discipline by Adam Steiner was written on the cover page. Did Dad write a book regarding parenting? I flipped through it till I came to a page and started reading. Behave, or else a monster will come after you. That was the phrase my wife Amy used to frighten my daughter Gemma with. Gemma was a lovely child, only 8 years old, and it always worked on her. Playing too noisily in the yard, a monster will come after you. She didn't finish all of her peas at dinner, a monster will come after you. Is she not cleaning her room? You get the idea. That is, until she started seeing actual monsters. Can I ask you a question, Daddy? Oh, sure, honey, what's up? I said with a smile. She hesitated and looked about with innocent wide eyes before returning her gaze to me. Do monsters exist? I chuckled, turning my gaze to Amy in the other room. She entered the room, clutching a glass of water, and joined in on the talk. What's so funny? She asked, taking a seat next to the sofa where I and Gemma sat. Gemma wants to know if monsters exist, I explained, smiling. Amy also laughed. We reassured our tiny girl that monsters do not exist and that she had nothing to be afraid of. Gemma took a deep breath and glanced at each of us. I could tell she wanted to ask another question. I drew her closer to me and gave her an encouraging grip on the arm. What if a monster comes and takes me like the one that got Adam? She said, her childlike voice shaking. Amy's grasp on her glass of water became so firm that her knuckles whitened, and I clenched my teeth. We didn't discuss Adam. He was, whatever you want to call him, our son. He went missing approximately a year ago, and Amy hasn't been able to cope with hearing his name since. Gemma had long learned not to talk about him for fear of upsetting her mother, but I just tried not to think about it at all. The cops had been hunting for weeks, and we'd all been out looking for the square foot of nothing. There were no hints or indications, just an emptiness in the room where Adam should have been. The police suspected a runaway. After all, Adam was 16, which brought with it the typical teen attitude and drama. But running away wasn't Adam. He was too self-assured and confident in himself to escape anything. Another possibility was kidnapping, but whoever did it would fight with their hands. It was an unresolved riddle, an unending question mark in all of our lives, and something that was just not discussed. A monster didn't kidnap Adam because monsters don't exist, Amy said, her grasp on the glass of water uncomfortably near to fracturing. Gemma started crying and held me firmly. I held her and told her Mama was sorry and that she didn't intend to yell, and I gave Amy a warning look. She groaned and stood up, mumbling, "I'm going to bed." I proposed that Gemma and I do the same, and proceeded to tuck her in and read her a tale before joining Amy in bed. Gemma appeared anxious during breakfast the next day. I was reading a book and sipping coffee when she blurted out, "Last night there was a monster at the window." I and Amy exchanged looks before telling Gemma once more that monsters didn't exist. She didn't let the bland reassurances of the night before go as easily this time, and she carried on. "No, I swear it was there. It was calling my name," she sobbed, breaking down in tears. I put down my book and approached her. "Monsters don't exist, Gemma, honey. You were probably only dreaming," I remarked quietly, as I placed my hand on her shoulder and squeezed her. "Come on, Daddy will drive you to school." Gemma was still sniffling as we drove to school quietly. She didn't even say goodbye as she exited the vehicle. Amy was there to greet me when I returned home. "What are we going to do about this?" she said urgently, her eyes fixed on me. I exhaled a sigh. I understood what she meant. Gemma couldn't believe in monsters since she was much too old, and she already had an anxious disposition as a result of her elder brother's disappearance. I had to make sure she didn't bring it up again. I moved gently across the garden. I walked up to the shed and unlocked the door. The shed was a large wooden building built of thick planks of wood that had been included with the home. I'd updated it to ensure that it locked correctly and didn't leak, but there wasn't much more I needed to do to it. It had previously been used as a band practice space, so it was soundproofed and spacious. I walked inside after opening the door and locking it behind me. Gemma's monster was tied to a post at the far end of the shed. It was clad in torn rags, but had no dignity outside of that. Shit streaked down its legs, and its tiny frame supported a large, damaged skull. There was no nose, only 2 big punctures in the middle of the face, with blood and mucus crusting around the openings. One eye was bloodshot, and a nasty bloodshot pit where an eye should have been. Because the lips had been severed, a row of yellow, crooked teeth protruded from the center of the face. It was certainly a monster, and when I moved across the shed, it gave me a wary look. I leaned down close to the thing and paused, taking in the scent of crap, pee, and sweat in. Clipping the shackle back into place, it had come free and the creature had been attempting to pretend it was still trying it. If you ever trouble your sister again, I'll come back in here and scoop your other fucking eye out, you little cunt, I said violently. I rose and walked out, closing the shed behind me. I walked back across the garden to my house, where Amy awaited me. She asked if it was resolved with a questioning gaze. Don't worry, Gemma won't be having any more late-night visits from her monster, I added, smiling at my wife. You're the greatest dad in the world, she said softly, kissing me on the lips. I glanced up, surprised. What I was reading was unbelievable. Adam had been kept in the shed by his father since the age of 7. My hands trembled as I turned the pages, unable to believe what I was reading. Mom and Dad were demons. They were heinous. My thoughts were racing as I rose up fast. I needed to get out to the shed. I needed to see whether Adam was still alive. I needed to... The basement door swung open. Gemma, are you here? My mother said. I remained silent, stepping gently so as not to creak the floors, my skin crawling with fear. You haven't read your father's book, haven't you? Story 3. I'm 16 male and love my mom, 35, but when I was 10, she had an affair and left us. I visited her as often as I could, and she always seemed so happy when I was there, but hated her new family, so I stopped visiting. Honestly, we rarely ever saw each other after, just for my birthday and events, really. She wants us to be close, but I want nothing to do with her new husband, so I've kept my distance. Except on February 20th, my dad announced he'd be out on business till the 12th, and my grandparents are stuck visiting relatives in Italy, and so I really had nowhere to go, and my mom jumped at the chance to have me stay with her. And just my luck that my mom's anniversary with her husband was on Sunday. I haven't had a good time here at all, so all I do is stay in my room doing homework or go out with friends to avoid family activities, because it sucks seeing how lovey-dovey she is with her husband, and how they seem like the perfect family with their daughters. The morning before her anniversary day, she came to my bed and tried to cuddle with me like before she left us, but it made me angry like we can't go back in time and pretend it is how it was. So I just pretended to be asleep and stayed curled up and frozen till she left. I started crying because of that, and I felt angry and snarky, and my mom majored in literature, so I got her a copy of Anna Karenina for her anniversary. That book's about a lady who leaves her husband and son for her lover. I've never read it, but I watched the movie with my girlfriend and hated it. Everyone was having fun but me, and then people gave their gifts. I gave mine, and when my mom saw what it was, she seemed shocked, but just said thanks. The party ended like an hour after, but at night when she was in her room, I heard her crying really loudly. So kind of eavesdropped a little and heard her saying stuff about that book and me and her husband trying to calm her. The next day at breakfast, she left for work early before I woke up, and her husband straight up called me stupid and other stuff for gifting them that. It's been a few days now, and my mom has barely talked to me. Honestly, I feel so wrong I made my mom cry, but at the same time, I don't want to be here, and she knows that, so am I really that stupid? After I told my girlfriend about the party, she told me that I could stay with her, and I talked to my dad and decided to go stay with my girlfriend. My mom agreed to drive me there. As she drove, she wanted to talk, but I just froze, and she drove to a parking lot and started talking. She said a lot of stuff about the book, about still seeing me like I'm her baby. her not actually being happy about us, but ended with her saying it's okay for me to hate her for what she did, because she hurt me and she'd never push to be my mom again. But if I ever wanted, she'd be there for me. But I don't hate her. I love her, so I started crying really bad. I've never had a breakdown, but I think that's what it was. I remember her taking me to the back seat and hugging me and trying to say I love her, while crying, but it is a blur. She calmed me down, and I told her how I feel, and I do want her to be my mom. I just hate her husband. She told me it was okay, and she's wrong, and we talked a lot, but kept crying, so she got me Advil because my head started hurting. She seemed sad I hate her husband, but got really mad at him when I told her all the mean things he said to me, and said she'd never let him get between us again. She said she'd take me to therapy with just her, no matter what Dad says, and to spend time with me alone. She dropped me off, and I felt better since I stayed there until my dad came back. My dad promised never to send me there again and to stay at my girlfriend's if my grandparents stay in Italy. He agreed to let me do family therapy with my mom. We haven't started it yet, but my mom has kept her promise to spend time with me so far, and it does make me feel happier.